There are moments that split your life into before and after. Mine happened on a Tuesday evening, standing behind the bar at Lavalito, when I forgot the first rule of survival. Never speak in your mother tongue when you're supposed to be someone else. Asterisk, asterisk. The evening air hung thick with the scent of truffle oil and bergamot as I pushed through Lavalito's heavy brass doors at precisely 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my shift began. My black uniform was pressed, my hair swept into its usual low knot, my hands steady as I tied my apron with practiced precision. 3 years, 5 months, and 16 days I'd worked here. Not once had I been late. Not once had I caused a problem. Invisibility was an art I'd perfected. And Marco's voice cut through the kitchen's controlled chaos, sharper than usual. His hand gripped my elbow as I reached for my order pad, his fingers cold even through my sleeve. You're on table 3 tonight. My stomach dropped. That's Sienna's section. Sienna's gone home. Migraine. His eyes darted toward the dining room, then back to me. Listen to me very carefully. Table 3 is Omer Cross. Do you understand what that means? I understood. Everyone at Lavalito understood. Omer Cross wasn't just a regular. He was the regular. The man whose reservations cleared the schedule, whose presence made even the maitre d' speak in hushed tones. Some said he owned half the restaurant. Others whispered he owned half the city. What everyone agreed on was this: you didn't make mistakes when serving Omer Cross. I need this job, Marco, I said quietly. His expression softened for just a moment. I know. That's why you'll be perfect. Professional. Precise. Invisible. Invisible. That word had become my prayer, my armor, my entire existence in this city. In Rome, I'd been Francesca Ricci, visible, traceable, hunted. In London, I was and are Francis, a ghost in a black uniform who poured wine and cleared plates and never, ever drew attention. I straightened my spine, smoothed my apron, and nodded. The dining room of Lavalito glowed like the inside of a jewelry box, all mahogany panels and beveled mirrors, crystal chandeliers casting amber light across white linens. It was the kind of place where silence felt expensive, where even laughter was kept at a respectable volume. I'd always found comfort in that controlled elegance, in the predictability of the routine. But tonight, something felt different. Table 3 sat in the restaurant's most private corner, partially obscured by a decorative screen of frosted glass and wrought iron. I could see the silhouettes of men in dark suits, hear the low murmur of voices that stopped when I approached. I took a breath, arranged my face into pleasant neutrality, and stepped around the screen. The temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. 6 men sat around the table, but my eyes went immediately to the one who sat with his back to the wall, the position of someone who needed to see everything, everyone. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested both discipline and danger, lips that weren't quite smiling but weren't exactly cold either. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, the kind of garment that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. A silver watch caught the light at his wrist. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, dark, almost black in the low light, and fixed on me with an intensity that felt physical. Omer Cross. Good evening, gentlemen. My voice came out steady, professional. And I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with drinks? I moved around the table, taking orders, my pen flowing across the pad. Scotch. Red wine. Sparkling water. My training took over, smile, eye contact, attentiveness without intrusion. But I felt his gaze tracking my movements, felt it like heat against my skin. When I reached him, I kept my eyes on my notepad. And for you, sir? Look at me. It wasn't a request. I lifted my gaze. His head tilted slightly, studying me the way someone might study a painting they were considering purchasing. How long have you worked here? 3 years, sir. And in those 3 years, I've never seen you. I work most evenings. Perhaps our schedules haven't aligned. I kept my tone light, forgettable. Something flickered across his face, amusement, maybe, or curiosity. Francis. That's your surname. My heart stuttered, but my expression didn't change. Yes, sir. English name. Yes, sir. But you're not English. The statement hung in the air between us. I felt the other men at the table watching, waiting. I'm British, I said carefully. May I get your drink order? His lips curved just slightly. Macallan, 25.
Neat.
I nodded and turned away, feeling those dark eyes on my back as I retreated. What just happened? In the 3 years I'd worked here, I'd served hundreds of wealthy, powerful men. I'd learned to deflect personal questions, to be pleasant but unmemorable, to exist in their world without leaving an impression. But something about Omer Cross made that carefully constructed invisibility feel paper-thin. I delivered the drinks on autopilot, my mind racing. Asterisk, he was testing me.
Why?
What does he know? Asterisk. Nothing, I told myself firmly. He couldn't know anything. And Francis existed on paper, had a national insurance number, a bank account, a clean history. Francesca Ricci was buried in Rome, along with the scandal, the investigation, the threats that had sent me fleeing in the middle of the night. I was safe. I had to be safe. The evening progressed with excruciating slowness. I brought courses, burrata with heirloom tomatoes, hand-rolled pappardelle, branzino that had been flown in that morning. The men talked in low voices, occasionally in Italian, though I kept my face carefully blank, as if I understood nothing. But I understood everything. And with each trip to the table, I felt Omer's attention settling on me like snow, quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. It was during dessert service that my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I never carried my phone during shifts. But Mama had been ill, pneumonia that wouldn't clear, and I'd been waiting for the doctor's call all day. I'd meant to leave it in my locker. I'd forgotten. The phone buzzed again as I stood at the bar, waiting for espresso. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I pulled it out, saw the Italian country code, and answered without thinking. Asterisk pronto? Asterisk. The word slipped out in my mother's language, soft and instinctive.
Asterisco Francesca. È la dottoressa Marchetti. Asterisco. Asterisco sì, dottoressa.
Un momento. Asterisk. I turned away from the bar, pressing the phone closer to my ear, switching into the rapid, fluid Italian I'd spent 3 years suppressing.
Asterisco come sta la mamma? Asterisco.
The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. Pneumonia had moved into both lungs. They were admitting her tonight. I should prepare to come home. My eyes burned.
Asterisco sì, capisco. Grazie. Richiamo dopo il turno. Asterisco.
I ended the call and stood there, staring at the espresso machine, at my reflection in its chrome surface. My mother was alone in Rome while I hid in London like a criminal. When had I become this person? When had survival started to feel like cowardice? When I turned back to face the dining room, the world had gone eerily quiet. Conversation had stopped at table 3. All 6 men were looking at me. But Omer Cross wasn't just looking, he was seeing me, his dark eyes sharp with recognition, with understanding, with something that made my blood run cold. He knew. I don't know how, but in that moment, with those Italian words still hanging in the air between us, he knew I wasn't who I claimed to be. I crossed the dining room on legs that felt like water, the espresso cups rattling slightly on my tray. I set them down with mechanical precision, my hands steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. Will there be anything else? My voice was perfectly level. Your accent, Omer said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. It's beautiful. Where in Italy are you from? The other men at the table had gone silent, watching. I'm not from Italy, sir. I studied abroad briefly. The lie tasted like ash. Which city? Florence. Another lie. Asterisk Firenze. Asterisk, he said it the Italian way, the R rolling softly. Beautiful city. Though I prefer Rome myself. Have you been? Was he toying with me? Once or twice. I stepped back. Please excuse me. I made it to the kitchen before my hands started shaking. Anne? Are you all right? Marco appeared beside me, concern creasing his forehead. I'm fine. Just. I couldn't finish the sentence. The rest of the service passed in a blur. I brought the check in its leather folder, which Omer signed without looking at the total. When I returned to collect it, he held it out to me, but when I reached for it, his fingers didn't release. And I looked up. "That call," he said softly, his thumb brushing against the back of my hand where I gripped the folder. "I hope everything is all right with your mother." The room tilted. He released the folder, and I took it, my heart hammering so hard I thought he might hear it. "Asterisk, grazie, asterisk," he murmured, that single Italian word deliberate, weighted with meaning. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and led his associates toward the door. I watched them leave, the black folder still clutched in my hands, the phantom warmth of his touch burning against my skin. When I finally opened it, I found a tip that was 5 times my weekly salary, and beneath it, a black business card with nothing but a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no explanation, just a number, and the certain knowledge that tomorrow, everything would change. What happens when the past you buried refuses to stay dead? But before we begin, click subscribe, and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. I stood in the empty dining room long after the last customers had left, staring at that card, and I felt the past I'd buried for 3 years begin to crack open like a fault line beneath my feet. Because men like Omer Cross didn't leave business cards for waitresses. They didn't watch you with that kind of predatory curiosity unless they were hunting something. And the moment I'd answered that phone call in Italian, the moment I'd revealed the truth hidden beneath Anne Francis's careful disguise, I'd become prey. Asterisk. Asterisk, I thought I'd escaped Rome. I thought I'd left Francesca Ricci to die in a file cabinet somewhere in the Ministry of Trade. But standing there with that black card in my trembling hands, I understood what I'd been too naive to see before. Some things can't be outrun. Some identities can't be erased. And some men like Omer Cross, don't just stumble into your life. Asterisk. They come looking for you. And now I needed to understand why. The kitchen felt too bright after the intimate darkness of the dining room. I set the empty espresso tray down with shaking hands, my breath coming shallow and fast. Through the circular window in the swinging door, I could see table 3, see Omer Cross leaning back in his chair, watching the kitchen entrance as if he could see straight through the steel door to where I stood. And Marco materialized beside me, his voice low. "You look pale. Do you need?" "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. I pressed my palms flat against the stainless steel counter, willing them to stop trembling. "What's next for table 3? Marco consulted his tablet. "Dessert course. The wine pairings. Then digestives." His eyes studied my face. "Are you sure you're okay? I can have Thomas."
No.
The word came out too sharp. I softened my tone. "No, I'll finish the service." I had to finish it. Running now would only confirm whatever suspicions had sparked in Omer Cross's dark eyes when he'd heard me speak Italian. If I maintained my composure, maybe, he'd dismiss it as coincidence. Lots of people studied languages. Lots of people had Italian relatives. Lots of people don't flee Rome in the middle of the night with falsified documents. I pushed away from the counter and checked my reflection in the chrome of the espresso machine. My face looked back at me, pale but composed, every hair still in place. And R. Francis. Reliable. Professional. Invisible. "Dessert for table 3, I said to the pastry chef. "The tasting menu." Marco caught my elbow as I reached for the tray. "Mr. Cross asked specifically that you continue serving them. No one else." His fingers tightened slightly. "Whatever's happening at that table, be careful." The warning in his voice made my stomach clench, but I nodded and lifted the tray. 6 plates of tiramisu, each one a perfect architectural construction of mascarpone and espresso-soaked ladyfingers, dusted with cocoa powder dark as Omer's eyes.
Stop it. Stop thinking about his eyes.
The dining room had emptied slightly. It was past 10 now, and only the most dedicated diners remained. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I approached table 3, the sound too loud in the hushed space. The men's conversation stopped as I rounded the frosted glass screen. This time, I didn't look at Omer first. I focused on the plates, on the precise placement of each dessert, on the practice patter that came with the course. Tiramisu prepared in the traditional Venetian style, with and my name in his voice made me pause, the last plate still in my hand. I looked up. He was watching me with that same unsettling intensity, but now there was something else in his expression, curiosity mixed with something darker, something that made my pulse quicken for reasons I didn't want to examine. Yes, sir? Sit down. The request, no. The command sent ice through my veins. Sir, I'm not permitted to. I'm asking you to sit. His voice remained quiet, but every man at the table had gone still. Just for a moment, one of his associates, a man with silver at his temples and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, pulled out the empty chair beside him. The gesture was courteous, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I glanced toward the kitchen, toward Marco, who stood visible through the circular window, his face tight with concern. But what could I do? Refuse? Make a scene? Draw even more attention to myself? I set down the final plate and lowered myself into the chair, perching on its edge, ready to bolt. Omer leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the table, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. The pose was casual, but nothing about him felt relaxed. Francis, he said, and the way he shaped my surname felt like a test. Is that your real name? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of tension around the table. Yes, sir. My voice came out steady, but I heard the hairline crack in it, the fault line running beneath the surface. His head tilted just slightly. English name. Yes, sir. But your tongue. He paused, and that faint smile touched his lips again. Your tongue betrays you. The words hung in the air between us, weighted with double meaning. Around the table, the other men had stopped even the pretense of eating their dessert. They were watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match, waiting to see who would flinch first. I don't understand, sir. Another lie. I understood perfectly. When you answered your phone, Omer continued, his voice dropping lower, intimate despite the audience. You spoke Italian. Not the Italian of someone who studied abroad briefly. The Italian of someone who was born to it, who dreamed in it, who, his pause was deliberate, who perhaps had another name before Francis. Roma, 2 years ago. Winter rain against marble steps. The flashback hit me like a slap, sudden and disorienting. I was back in the Ministry of Trade building, walking down that endless corridor toward Director Moretti's office, my heels echoing on marble floors that had witnessed centuries of Italian bureaucracy. Francesca Ricci. My supervisor's voice, sharp with accusation, cutting through the afternoon stillness. Other translators stopped their work, looked up from their desks, their eyes following me like searchlights. My office. Now. The heavy door closing. The documents spread across Moretti's desk, some of them marked with the red stamp I'd seen 100 times before. Classificato. Care to explain how these ended up in the German embassy's possession? My hands shaking, just like they were shaking now, hidden beneath the table at La Valletto. I don't know what you're talking about. You are the only translator with access to these files. The only one. My voice caught. I blinked, and I was back in the restaurant, back in London, back in the lie I'd constructed around myself like a fortress of paper. Omer was still watching me, waiting. How long had I been silent? Seconds? Minutes? My grandmother was Italian, I said finally, grasping for any explanation that sounded plausible. I grew up speaking it at home. Ah. He nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense, but his eyes told a different story. And which region was she from? Trap. This is a trap. Tuscany. The lie came easier this time. Beautiful. He picked up his wine glass, swirled the dark liquid. Though your accent sounds more Roman to me, that particular way you soften the consonants, the rhythm of your speech, it's quite distinctive. One of the other men, the one with the scar, laughed softly. Boss knows his Italian geography. I know a lot of things, Omer said, still looking at me. It's important in my line of work to pay attention to details, the small inconsistencies that most people overlook. He set down his wine glass with precise care. For instance, most British citizens carry their phones in their handbag, not their apron pocket. Unless they're expecting an important call. A call they can't afford to miss. My throat had gone completely dry. And when that call comes, he continued, his voice dropping even lower, and they hear bad news, say, about a sick mother, there's a particular look that crosses their face.
Fear. Grief.
Guilt. His eyes locked onto mine. The guilt is the interesting part. Because why would someone feel guilty about a sick mother? Unless... He let the sentence hang. Unless they'd abandoned her. The scarred man supplied helpfully. Unless they'd run away. Omer corrected gently. From something. Or someone. Moretti's face red with rage. You've committed treason, Francesca. Do you understand that? Treason. The carabinieri are on their way. My hands clutching my bag, backing toward the door. I didn't do anything. I swear. Then why are you running? The click of handcuffs being pulled from a desk drawer. The sound of my own footsteps, running down that marble corridor while voices shouted behind me. I need to get back to work. I started to rise, but Omer's hand moved, not touching me. Just a subtle gesture that somehow pinned me in place more effectively than physical contact. One more question, he said. Then you can go. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. That call tonight. Your mother is ill? I nodded stiffly. In Italy? Another nod. But you're here. In London. Working in a restaurant. His head tilted again, that predatory curiosity sharpening. Instead of being with her. Why? That's not your business, sir. The words came out before I could stop them. Around the table, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The other men exchanged glances. But Omer just smiled. A real smile this time, showing teeth. You're right. It's not. He leaned back in his chair, releasing me from the weight of his attention. Thank you for your honesty and, or should I say, and is fine. I stood quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. Enjoy your dessert, gentlemen. I made it 3 steps before his voice stopped me. And I didn't turn around. Your mother's doctor, Dr. Marchetti, was it? He paused, letting that sink in. Letting me understand that he'd been close enough to hear not just my language, but the name I'd been given on the phone. Please give her my regards. And tell her to get well soon. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to nod, to continue walking, to maintain the illusion of composure even as my world tilted on its axis. In the kitchen, Marco grabbed my arm. What happened? You were sitting. I'm fine. I need to. I couldn't finish. I grabbed a water pitcher, pretended to check its level, anything to keep my hands busy. The next hour passed in a strange, dissociated blur. I brought digestives, grappa for Omer, amaretto for his associates. I refilled water glasses. I cleared plates with mechanical precision. And through it all, I felt his eyes on me, tracking my movements with that unnerving focus. By the time table 3 finally requested their check, my nerves were stripped raw. I presented the leather folder with hands that had stopped shaking through sheer force of will, set it on the table between Omer and the scarred man, and stepped back. Thank you for dining with us this evening. Omer opened the folder, glanced at the total without reaction, a bill that would have been 3 months of my rent, and slid a black credit card into the sleeve. But he didn't close the folder. Instead, he pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then set it face down on the table. I'll be just a moment, he said to his associates. Why don't you all head to the car? The men stood, nodding to me politely as they filed past. The scarred man paused, leaned close to Omer, whispered something I couldn't hear. Omer's response was just as quiet, but I caught the edge of it. Handle it. Then they were gone, and I was alone with Omer Cross in the now empty private dining room. He ran his credit card through the machine I'd brought, signed the receipt without looking at it, and then pushed both the folder and his phone toward me. Look at the screen. Sir, I don't think. Look. My hands moved without permission. I picked up the phone. On the screen was a photograph. An old one, judging by the graininess. A marble building I recognized too well, the Ministry of Trade in Rome. And in the foreground, Walking down the front steps with a leather portfolio under her arm was a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a professional twist.
Me.
2 years younger. Different clothes. Different name. But unmistakably me. I knew I recognized you, Omer said quietly, the moment I heard you speak. I've been trying to place the face all evening, and then it finally came to me. He took the phone back, his fingers brushing mine. Francesca Ricci, former translator for the Italian Ministry of Trade. Subject of an internal investigation for leaked classified documents. Disappeared before formal charges could be filed. His eyes met mine. Presumed to have fled the country with assistance from unknown parties. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. I'm not. Don't. His voice was soft but final. Don't insult my intelligence with more lies. We both know who you are. What do you want? The question came out as a whisper. He stood, buttoning his jacket with unhurried precision. When he was done, he reached into his inside pocket and pulled out his credit card, the one he'd supposedly already used to pay. He held it out to me. I took it automatically, confused. Tell your mother, he said, moving closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne again, that woody scent that somehow smelled like money and power and danger, that she raised a clever woman. Clever enough to learn Italian, to change her name, to build a new life from nothing. He leaned in, his mouth near my ear, his voice dropping to barely more than a breath. Not clever enough to stay hidden, though. Then he stepped back, adjusted his cuffs, and smiled. That same faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'll be in touch, Francesca. He walked out, leaving me standing alone with his credit card in my hand and the ruins of my carefully constructed life scattered at my feet. When I finally made it to the staff room at the end of my shift, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and pressed my forehead against the cold metal door. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another call from Rome, from the hospital, from a life I couldn't afford to return to and couldn't afford to ignore. But all I could hear was Omer's voice, soft and certain. I'll be in touch. Not a question. Not even a threat. Just a promise. And somehow that was worse. The last diners left at 11:47 p.m. I watched the kitchen staff filter out through the back entrance, their voices echoing in the alley. Normal, mundane conversations about tomorrow's shifts and weekend plans. The life I'd had an hour ago. Marco stopped me as I reached for my coat. His face was drawn, older somehow in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the staff room. Mr. Cross requested you stay. He said it like an apology. He's upstairs, in the private office. My stomach hollowed out. Did he say why? Men like him don't explain. Marco's hand settled on my shoulder, fatherly and worried. You're not in trouble, at least, not with the restaurant. But, and,
He squeezed gently.
Be careful. Men like Omer Cross don't ask. They decide. And once they've decided something about you, there's no changing their mind. The staircase to the upper offices felt like a climb toward judgment. Each step creaked beneath my weight, announcing my approach. At the landing, a door stood half open, warm light spilling across dark hardwood floors. I knocked once. Softly. Come in, Francesca. The name, my real name, sent a shiver down my spine. The office was exactly what I'd expected. Minimalist, cold luxury rendered in dark wood and brushed steel. A desk that looked carved from a single piece of ebony. Leather chairs the color of dried blood. And on the wall behind the desk, a single painting. Venice at dusk, the city's golden light dying into blue shadows. Omer stood at the window, his back to me, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn when I entered. Close the door. I did, my hand lingering on the handle. You stand very still, he said to the glass. Most people fidget when they're nervous. Shift their weight. Touch their hair. But you... He turned finally, his eyes finding mine across the dim room. You've trained yourself not to move. Military discipline? Or something else? I don't know what you mean. There it is again. He moved toward the desk, his movements unhurried, predatory. That perfect posture. That controlled voice. You've worked very hard to become invisible, haven't you? to smooth away every distinctive edge. I said nothing. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Why leave Italy, Francesca? People don't abandon paradise unless they're chased out. Personal reasons. The lie felt flimsy even as I spoke it. His smile was slow, dangerous.
Ah.
Personal reasons. He savored the words like wine. Those are my favorite kind. So much more interesting than professional ones. He paused, let the silence stretch. Did someone hurt you? Or did you hurt someone else? I should go. Not yet. His voice didn't rise, but something in it made me freeze. I'm not finished. The air felt too thin. I forced myself to breathe normally, to meet his gaze without flinching. He studied me for another long moment, then pushed off the desk. You can go. For now. I turned toward the door.
Francesca.
I stopped, but didn't turn around. You'll hear from me soon, he said, his voice soft and certain. One way or another. The rain started as I reached the street, freezing November rain that soaked through my coat in seconds. I walked quickly, my head down, my mind spinning. Asterisk, he knows. He knows everything. Asterisk. Behind me, headlights reflected in the puddles. A black car, moving slowly, keeping pace. I turned a corner. The car turned too. My heart hammered. I walked faster. The car stayed exactly 3 lengths behind, silent as a shadow. I didn't look back. Want to know what happens when Anne returns home? What's waiting for her? And what does Omer Cross really want? Asterisk, asterisk. Continue reading to discover the truth Anne's been running from, and the impossible choice she'll have to make. The black car disappeared when I reached the tube station, but I felt its absence like a threat, a reminder that Omer Cross could follow me whenever he wanted.
He simply chose not to. Yet.
My apartment in North London was exactly what someone would expect from a woman trying to disappear. A studio on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian, furnished with the bare minimum. IKEA bed. IKEA desk. A single chair. White walls I'd never bothered to decorate. No photographs. No personal touches. Nothing that said Francesca, or even Anne. Just a space to sleep between shifts, as anonymous as a hotel room. I locked the door behind me, both locks plus the chain, and leaned against it, breathing hard. He knows. The words echoed in my skull like a death knell. 2 years. 2 years of careful invisibility, of keeping my head down, of becoming nobody. All of it unraveled by one phone call in Italian. My hands were shaking again as I pulled out my phone. 23 contacts, half of them Italian numbers I hadn't called since Rome.
Mama.
My cousin Sophia. My old roommate Julia. Each name a connection to the person I used to be. I deleted them one by one, my thumb moving mechanically across the screen. It felt like erasing pieces of my soul, but what choice did I have? If Omer Cross could find me, who else could? When only British numbers remained, I moved to the desk where I kept my documents. Birth certificate, the real one, Italian, with the name Francesca Maria Ricci in official typescript. University transcripts from Roma Tre. Letters of recommendation from professors who probably didn't even remember me now. And buried at the bottom, wrapped in a silk scarf like a relic, my Italian passport. I pulled it out, the burgundy cover soft against my palms. Inside, a younger version of myself stared back, 24 years old, hair longer, eyes brighter. Naive enough to believe that competence and hard work mattered more than politics and blame. Roma, Ministry of Trade, 18 months ago. The flashback crashed over me like a wave. I was standing in the archives room, surrounded by filing cabinets that held decades of trade agreements, intelligence briefings, diplomatic correspondence. My job was simple: translate documents from English and German into Italian for senior officials. Routine work. Boring, even. Except for the file I'd found misfiled in the wrong cabinet.
Asterisco classifica. Commercio con Germania asterisco.
Trade documents with Germany shouldn't have been classified. Curious, I'd opened it, started reading. And then I'd understood. Secret negotiations. Contracts that violated EU regulations. Money flowing through shell companies. Names I recognized, politicians, industrialists, people whose faces appeared on television talking about transparency and accountability. I'd done what any translator would do. I'd reported it to my supervisor. Asterisk, Francesca, these documents are above your clearance level. Asterisk. But sir, if there's corruption. Asterisk, there is no corruption. There is only misunderstanding. File it properly, and forget you saw it. Asterisk. I should have listened. Should have filed it and forgotten. But I'd mentioned it to my roommate Julia over wine that night, and she'd mentioned it to her boyfriend, and he'd worked at a newspaper, and somehow, asterisk, 3 weeks later those documents were front-page news. And every investigators I turned to me. The only translator with access. The only one who'd filed a complaint. The obvious leak. Asterisk, Francesca Ricci, you are suspended pending investigation. Asterisk, I didn't. Asterisk, classified documents do not appear in newspapers by accident. Asterisk, someone set me up. Asterisk, then you'll have the opportunity to prove that in court. Until then, surrender your credentials. Asterisk, but I'd never made it to court, because 2 nights later, someone had followed me home from the metro, and the next morning, I'd found a note under my door, typed on official ministry letterhead. Leave Rome. Tonight. Or face charges that will destroy you. No signature. No explanation. Just a threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. So I'd run. Packed a single suitcase. Caught the last flight to London. And become, and are, Francis. A ghost with no past, no future. Just an endless present of pouring wine and avoiding questions. My phone buzzed, jolting me back to the present. An Italian number. Not Mama's. Not anyone I recognized. It rang and rang, the sound too loud in the silent apartment. I watched it vibrate across the desk, my heart in my throat, until it finally went to voicemail. Silence. Then it rang again. Same number. I powered it off completely and shoved it in a drawer. Morning came too quickly. I barely slept. Every creak of the building, every car passing outside made me flinch. When my alarm finally went off at 4 p.m., I felt hollowed out, running on nothing but caffeine and adrenaline. Lavalido felt different when I arrived. The air hummed with tension, with whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The other servers avoided my eyes. Even the kitchen staff, usually boisterous and warm, went quiet when I walked past. Marco stood by the reservations desk, his back rigid, speaking in low tones with Sienna. They both looked up when they saw me, and something passed between them. Pity, maybe, or fear. And Marco said, too loudly, too carefully, "Good you're here. We need to review tonight's seating." But his eyes said something else. I'm sorry. I tied my apron, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. Same face. Same uniform, same invisible N. But everyone was looking at me differently now, like I was already gone. Heard Mr. Cross was here late last night, asking questions about her. Marco said she was called to his office. The whispers followed me through the restaurant like smoke. I kept my head down, checked my tables, pretended everything was normal. At 5:30, a man in a black suit entered through the front door. Not a customer, wrong time, wrong posture. He moved like Omer's associates, with that same coiled alertness. He spoke briefly with the maitre d', who pointed toward me. My stomach dropped. The man approached, his face neutral, professional. Miss Francis. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He held out a black envelope, the same expensive cardstock as Omer's business card. For you. I took it with numb fingers. He nodded once and left. Around me, the entire restaurant watched. Marco had gone pale. Sienna stared openly. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a single card with 2 words written in bold, masculine handwriting. Tonight. After closing. No signature. No explanation needed. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of mechanical movements, pouring wine, clearing plates, smiling at customers who didn't see me. But every time I passed a window, I caught my reflection superimposed over the restaurant's golden lights, the amber warmth that had once meant safety, stability, a place to hide. Now those same lights felt like the bars of a gilded cage. And somewhere in the city, Omer Cross was waiting. Waiting to decide what to do with the woman who used to be Francesca Ricci. Waiting to decide if I would disappear again. Or if this time, I'd simply cease to exist. The restaurant emptied slowly that night, as if the universe itself was conspiring to drag out my dread. By 11:30, the last customers had finally left, their laughter echoing into the cold November air. By midnight, the kitchen staff had filtered out through the back. By 12:15, only Marco remained, hovering near the staff room like a worried parent. And his voice was quiet. "You don't have to go up there. We could call someone."
Who?
I pulled off my apron, folded it with mechanical precision. "The police? And tell them what? That a customer wants to speak with me?" "This isn't," he ran a hand through his thinning hair. "This doesn't feel right." "It's fine." The lie sat bitter on my tongue. "I'll be fine." But my hands shook as I climbed the stairs for the second time in 2 nights, each step feeling like a march toward execution. The office door stood open, waiting. I paused at the threshold, my breath catching. Omer sat behind the ebony desk, but he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, standing, not sitting, their hands clasped in front of them in that universal bodyguard posture. The one on the left was the scarred man from last night's dinner. The one on the right was younger, broader, with the flat eyes of someone who'd seen violence and delivered it. The painting of Venice seemed darker tonight, the dying light more ominous. "Come in, Francesca." Omer gestured to the chair across from him. "Close the door." I did, though every instinct screamed at me to run. The lock clicked with a finality that made my stomach clench. "Sit." I sat, my spine rigid, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Omer opened a manila folder on his desk, thick, official-looking, the kind of file that held someone's entire life distilled into bureaucratic documentation.
He didn't look at it, though. He looked at me.
"Francesca Maria Ricci," he began, his voice conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Born March 15th, 1997 in Rome. Only child of Elena Ricci, née Lombardi, and Antonio Ricci, deceased. Educated at Roma Tre University, degree in linguistics with honors. Fluent in Italian, English, German, and conversational French." My throat had gone completely dry. Hired by the Italian Ministry of Trade at age 24 as a junior translator. Promoted to senior translator within 18 months due to, and I quote, "exceptional linguistic precision and discretion." He flipped a page, though I suspected he had the contents memorized. "Then, in August 2 years ago, you were placed under internal investigation for allegedly leaking classified trade documents to the press." I didn't. He held up one hand, and the words died in my throat. "You fled Rome on August 23rd, taking the 11:45 p.m. flight to London Heathrow. You entered the UK on a tourist visa, which you overstayed. You purchased a forged national insurance number and work permit from," he glanced down, "a gentleman named Dmitry Volkov, who operates out of a pub in Hackney. You changed your name to and are Francis, rented a studio apartment in Tottenham, and found employment at La Valletta 3 months later." The room felt airless. The 2 men behind Omer hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. They watched me like predators watching prey. "How?" My voice cracked. I swallowed and tried again. "How do you know this?" Omer closed the folder with a soft thump. "Information is my business, Francesca. It's what I do.
Collecting it.
Trading it. Using it." He leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes never leaving mine. "And you, my dear, are a particularly interesting piece of information. What do you want?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "I need someone like you." He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Someone fluent in multiple languages. Someone intelligent. Someone who knows how to be invisible when necessary. He paused, let that sink in. Someone smart enough to disappear completely, but loyal enough not to disappear from me. My hands clenched in my lap. I can't. You can." His voice remained gentle, reasonable. You already did. You rebuilt yourself from nothing. Changed your identity. Survived in a foreign country with no support system. That takes remarkable skill. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I have use for someone with your particular talents. What kind of use? I force myself to meet his eyes. What exactly are you asking me to do? Translation work. Confidential communications between my business associates. Italian, German, sometimes French. Documents that require discretion. He spread his hands as if offering something benign. Nothing illegal. Simply sensitive. I don't believe you. The corner of his mouth quirked up. Smart. You shouldn't believe me. But belief isn't required for employment, Francesca. Only compliance.
No.
The word burst out before I could stop it. I won't work for you. I won't. You don't have a choice. His tone hadn't changed, still quiet, still reasonable. But something in the air shifted. The men behind him straightened slightly. Omer's eyes hardened, losing whatever warmth they'd held. Let me be clear, he continued, pulling his phone from his jacket pocket. I have contacts at Interpol. One phone call, and they'll know exactly where Francesca Ricci has been hiding for the past 2 years. You'll be arrested, extradited to Italy, and tried for espionage. He set the phone on the desk between us like a chess piece. Your mother, Elena, wasn't it? Sick with pneumonia in a Rome hospital. Will watch her only daughter go to prison. If she lives long enough to see the trial. The cruelty of it, the surgical precision of that threat, stole my breath. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. He picked up the phone, turned it in his hands thoughtfully. And I'm offering you a choice. Work for me, be compensated well, live freely, even visit your mother if you'd like, or refuse, and face the consequences of your past. His eyes met mine. It's not really a choice at all, is it? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What happens if I say yes? What happens to me? You continue working at La Valletta. Normal schedule, normal life. But a few nights a week, you come to my office, a different location, more private, and translate documents. Communications. Conversations. He shrugged. Simple work for someone with your background. And if I try to run again? Then I'll find you again. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. And next time, Francesca, there won't be a conversation. There will only be handcuffs. Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of a clock I hadn't noticed before. The men behind Omer remained motionless as statues. I felt the weight of my entire future, or lack of one, pressing down on my chest. How long? I asked finally. How long would I have to work for you? Until I no longer need you. Not helpful, not reassuring. And if I agree, what guarantee do I have that you won't turn me in anyway? Omer smiled, and for the first time, it looked almost genuine. You have my word, which, in my world, is considerably more valuable than any legal contract. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, trusting the word of a man who'd just blackmailed me. But what choice did I have? Run again? Change identities again? Abandon Mama while she was dying? Or surrender to this man and hope he kept his promises? I need time to think. No, you don't. He opened a desk drawer, pulled out a black business card. Heavier stock than the first one, with an embossed address in Mayfair. You'll report here tomorrow night at 10. Don't be late. I stared at the card without taking it.
Francesca.
His voice softened, almost sympathetic. Think before you say no. You'll regret the wrong answer longer than unemployment. He set the card on the edge of the desk, within my reach. Much longer. I stood on shaking legs, picked up the card. The address meant nothing to me, but the weight of it felt like shackles. What if I don't come? Omer's smile disappeared completely. Then I'll make the call. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if your mother died, thinking you were a traitor. I don't remember walking down the stairs. Don't remember leaving the restaurant or stepping into the freezing night air. I came back to myself standing at a bus stop 3 blocks away, the black business card clutched in my numb fingers, tears finally streaming down my face. Behind me, a black car idled at the curb. Watching. Waiting. making sure I understood that there was nowhere left to run. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that black business card, heard Omer's voice. You'll regret the wrong answer longer than unemployment. By the time my alarm went off at 3:45 p.m., I'd already been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios.
Run. Stay. Run. Stay.
Each option led to the same conclusion. I'd already lost. I showered mechanically, the hot water doing nothing to ease the tension coiled in my muscles. Dressed in my usual black pants and white button-down. Tied my hair back with the same precision I'd practiced for 3 years. In the mirror and Francis stared back at me, composed, professional, invisible. But I could see Francesca Ricci beneath the surface now, like a ghost haunting her own reflection. The tube ride to Lavalito passed in a blur of fluorescent lights and strangers' faces. I kept the black business card in my jacket pocket, my fingers returning to it obsessively, feeling its sharp corners dig into my palm. A reminder. A threat. A promise. Tomorrow night at 10. 24 hours to prepare for a life I'd never chosen. Lavalito's staff entrance was in the back alley, down a narrow passage that always smelled faintly of garlic and dishwater. Usually, I found it comforting, that familiar scent of work, of routine, of normality. Today it made my stomach turn. Inside, the kitchen hummed with pre-service energy. Chef Giovanni barked orders at the line cooks. Sienna rushed past with a stack of folded linens. Everything looked exactly as it had yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. Everything except the silence that fell when I walked in. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes darted away. Even Giovanni, who normally greeted everyone with booming Italian profanity, went quiet. I forced myself to keep walking, chin up, shoulders back. Through the kitchen. Down the narrow hallway to the staff room where our lockers lined one wall, like metal sentinels. My locker was number 7. Had been for 3 years, 5 months, and 16 days. I stopped in front of it, my hand reaching automatically for the combination lock. The lock was gone. My nameplate, the small brass rectangle that had read A. Francis in neat block letters, was gone too. In its place, someone had already affixed a new one. M. Torres. My hands shook as I pulled open the locker door. Empty. Completely, utterly empty. No spare apron. No emergency makeup kit. No phone charger or extra pair of shoes or the small framed photo of the Thames I'd kept tucked in the back corner. Not because it meant anything, but because empty lockers looked suspicious. All of it. Gone. And I spun around. Marco stood in the doorway, his face ashen, his hands twisting together like he was physically restraining himself from reaching out. What happened to my locker? My voice came out steadier than I felt. He glanced over his shoulder, then stepped closer, dropping his voice to barely above a whisper. Orders from above. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They told me this morning. Empty her locker. Remove her from the schedule. His eyes were wet. I tried to argue. Told them you were one of our best, but... Who gave the order? But I already knew. Marco's silence confirmed it. Where's my stuff? I asked. In a box. Behind the bar. And listen, he caught my arm as I moved past him. Whatever's happening with you and Mr. Cross, be careful. Please. I've worked here for 15 years and I've seen what happens to people who... He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I pulled free gently. Thank you, Marco. For everything. You're not even going to fight this? Fight? Against what? A man who knew every secret I'd tried to bury? Who had contacts at Interpol and associates who looked like they'd killed people before breakfast. No, I said quietly. I'm not going to fight. I found the box behind the bar, a small cardboard cube containing my entire life at Lavalito. My spare apron, neatly folded. The photo. A tube of lipstick. 3 years compressed into objects that fit in a container the size of a shoebox. I left it there. I didn't want any of it. The dining room was empty this early, tables set but vacant, candles unlit. Golden afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across white tablecloths. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like walking through a mausoleum. And there, in his usual booth, table 3, sat Omer Cross. He wasn't dressed for dinner. No suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing surprisingly tan skin, and a watch that probably cost more than my yearly salary. A file lay open on the table in front of him, and he read it with the focused attention of someone reviewing a contract. Or a dossier. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood. He didn't look up until I stood directly in front of his table, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You did this." My voice shook with barely controlled rage. He looked up slowly, his expression mild, almost curious. Then he closed the file and stood, not aggressive, but deliberate, his full height and presence suddenly dominating the space between us. "No," he said calmly. "You did." "I what?" "You answered a phone call in Italian. You exposed yourself." He gestured around the restaurant, at the empty tables, the watching silence from the kitchen. I simply followed through on the logical conclusion. "You're not a waitress anymore, Francesca." The name, my real name, spoken aloud in this place where I'd built my false one, made me flinch. You don't have the right. I own this restaurant." His voice remained soft, but the words landed like stones. "I have every right." The world tilted. "You what? Did you really think Lavalito was just a restaurant? That I came here 3 times a week because I enjoyed the risotto?" Something like amusement flickered across his face. "I bought this place 5 years ago. It's useful, legitimate business, good location, private rooms for meetings."
He paused.
"And an excellent place to observe people who don't want to be observed." I felt sick. "You were watching me." "Not at first. You were genuinely invisible for quite some time. But then," he reached into the file, pulled out a photograph. My photograph. The one from the Ministry of Trade. I received this 2 weeks ago. From an associate in Rome who deals in information. He thought I might be interested to know that Francesca Ricci, wanted for questioning in Italy, was serving wine in one of my restaurants. 2 weeks. He'd known for 2 weeks and said nothing. Just watched. Waited. "Why didn't you turn me in?" "Because you're worth more to me employed than arrested." He slid the file across the table toward me. "Open it." I didn't move. "Open it, Francesca." My hands shook as I flipped open the cover. Inside were documents, photocopies of classified files, trade agreements in Italian and German, communications between companies I recognized from my time at the ministry. And threaded through all of it, phrases I knew, translations I'd done years ago. These are a fraction of what I need translated. Properly translated. By someone who understands the nuances, the implications, the subtext. He pulled the file back. "You were good at your job, Francesca. One of the best. Before politics ruined you. I didn't leak those documents." "I know." The casual certainty in his voice stopped me cold. "You know?" "Of course. It was your roommate's boyfriend. Giulia Romano's boyfriend, Matteo Esposito, freelance journalist with gambling debts and flexible ethics." He said it like he was reciting her coffee order. "He took photos of documents from your apartment while you were sleeping. Giulia didn't know until afterward. By then, you'd already fled." Tears burned my eyes. She told me she didn't know how it happened. She didn't. She was protecting him. And probably felt guilty enough that she let you run rather than clear your name. Omer's expression softened fractionally. "You were the convenient scapegoat, Francesca. And rather than stay and fight charges you couldn't disprove, you ran. Smart, actually. Survival instinct." I sank into the opposite seat, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. "If you know I'm innocent, why are you doing this?" "Because innocent people are often the most useful. No divided loyalties. No competing agendas. Just compliance." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black envelope, thicker than the business card from last night. He slid it across the table between us. "What is this?" "Your severance package. Open it." I did, my fingers numb. Inside, a keycard, matte black with no identifying marks. A thick stack of 50-pound notes. I didn't count, but there had to be at least 2,000 pounds. A passport, British, with my photo but a different name, Anna Frost. And a slip of paper with an address in Mayfair written in the same bold handwriting as last night's note. You're sacked, Omer said simply. From Lavalito. Effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be deposited tomorrow. He gestured to the envelope. Report to the Mayfair address instead. Starting tonight, 10 p.m. The room spun. I haven't agreed to. Yes, you have. The moment you didn't run last night. The moment you came here today instead of disappearing again. His eyes locked onto mine. You agreed, Francesca. You just haven't accepted it yet. I'm not your employee. I shoved the envelope back toward him, rage and fear making my voice sharp. I'm not. You can't just. Then you're a liability. The words were so quiet I almost didn't hear them, but the threat in them was unmistakable. Employees have value, he continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. They can be compensated, protected, utilized. Liabilities, on the other hand. He left the sentence unfinished, but I understood perfectly. Liabilities disappeared. So that's it. My voice cracked. Work for you, or die. Don't be dramatic. Work for me, or go to prison. I'm not a murderer, Francesca. He leaned back, his posture relaxing. I'm a businessman, and I take care of my assets. The passport is real, not forged like your and Francis documents. The cash is yours to use however you want. The address is to a secure apartment. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable in a cage. Better than uncomfortable in a cell. He stood, buttoning his cuffs with practiced precision. 10 p.m., don't be late. And Francesca. He paused, looking down at me with something that might have been sympathy if I didn't know better. Fighting this won't change anything. It will only make things harder for both of us. Then he walked away, out through the main entrance, where a black car waited at the curb, engine running. I sat there in the empty restaurant, surrounded by tables set for diners who wouldn't arrive for hours, holding an envelope that represented the death of Anne Francis and the resurrection of someone new. Someone who belonged to Omer Cross. It started raining as I left Lavalito for the last time. Not the soft London drizzle I'd grown accustomed to, but a proper downpour that soaked through my jacket in seconds and plastered my hair to my skull. I stood under a flickering street lamp 3 blocks away, watching water cascade off the awning of a closed shop, the black envelope clutched against my chest. Around me, London moved with its usual indifference, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying past with umbrellas, the city breathing and living while my world collapsed. I thought about running. Again. Catching a train to Scotland, or a ferry to Ireland, or a flight to anywhere Omer Cross's reach didn't extend. But I knew the truth now. There was nowhere he couldn't find me. No identity I could build that he couldn't uncover. He'd proven that already. And Mama was dying in Rome. Alone. I opened the envelope, rain spattering the 50-pound notes, making the ink on the address bleed slightly. The keycard felt heavy in my palm. The passport, Anna Frost, stared up at me with my own face, wearing someone else's name. This is what surrender looked like. Not dramatic. Not violent. Just a woman standing in the rain, holding the pieces of her new prison, too tired to fight anymore. A black car pulled up to the curb, headlights cutting through the downpour. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Omer's scarred associate from the night before. Miss Ricci, he said politely, as if offering a courtesy instead of enforcing captivity. Mr. Cross thought you might need a ride. To Mayfair. I looked at the car. At the envelope. At the empty street stretching away into darkness. Then I got in. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing me inside, and as the car pulled away from the curb, I watched Lavalito disappear in the rain-streaked window. Those golden lights that had once meant safety, now just another false promise in a life built on lies. The driver didn't speak. Didn't need to. We both knew where this road ended. And there was no turning back. The townhouse was Georgian, elegant white stone facade, black iron railings, window boxes that probably held flowers in summer, but now stood empty in the November cold. Nothing about it screamed wealth or danger. It looked like 100 other Mayfair residences, the kind of place where diplomats and bankers lived quiet, respectable lives. The perfect camouflage. I stood on the pavement, rain still falling in sheets, the keycard burning in my pocket. It was 9:47 p.m., 13 minutes early. 13 minutes I could still turn around, walk away, disappear. But the black car that had driven me here idled at the corner, waiting, watching. I climbed the steps and raised my hand to knock. The door opened before my knuckles touched wood. The man who stood there wasn't Omer. He was older, maybe 50, with iron gray hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile decades ago. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and an earpiece, the wire disappearing beneath his collar. Miss Ricci. Not a question. Mr. Cross has been expecting you. He stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold into another world. The exterior had promised Georgian elegance. The interior delivered something else entirely. Luxury stripped of warmth. Marble floors. Dark wood paneling. But mounted on the walls, screens. At least a dozen, showing security feeds from what looked like different locations across London. And in the adjoining room, visible through French doors, more screens. More men in suits, speaking in hushed voices. Italian, Russian, German. Languages I understood perfectly. This way. The man, Rico, I'd learn later, guided me down a hallway lined with closed doors. Behind one, I heard the rapid click of keyboards. Behind another, a phone conversation in accented English about the shipment from Hamburg. We stopped at a door at the end of the hall. Rico knocked once, then opened it. Omer stood by the window, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the rain-streaked glass. When he turned, his expression was warm, almost gentle, as if welcoming a guest rather than a captive.
Francesca.
He crossed the room, and I fought the instinct to step back. Welcome. I'm glad you came. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices. You simply made the smart one. He gestured around the room, more screens here, but also filing cabinets, a conference table covered in documents. Welcome to my real restaurant, where the menu is made of secrets instead of risotto. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Almost. He moved to the conference table, selected a folder. Your first task. Intercepted communications between Italian financial brokers and several London shell companies. I need to know what they're actually saying beneath the business jargon. The subtext. The implications. He handed me the folder. I opened it automatically, my translator's instincts kicking in before my brain could protest. The documents were dense, financial terminology mixed with colloquialisms that would be meaningless to a non-native speaker. But I understood them perfectly. How did you intercept these? I asked. Does it matter? Yes. His smile widened. Good. You're already thinking like one of us. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. I have people in useful places. They acquire information. You make that information useful to me. I stared at the documents, feeling something shift inside me. Something I'd thought died in Rome. Purpose. The intellectual challenge of translation, of decoding meaning, of being good at something that mattered. Even if that something was illegal. Even if it meant working for a man who'd blackmailed me into compliance. When do you need this finished? My voice sounded distant, disconnected. Tomorrow. Rico will set you up in the workroom. He studied my face, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he saw straight through me, saw the part of me that was already intrigued despite the fear. You'll do well here, Francesca. Better than you think. As Rico led me away, I glanced back. Omer was still watching me, that knowing smile on his face. And I understood, with sudden, terrible clarity. I'd been caught the moment I'd answered that phone call. Everything since, the confrontation, the sacking, the choice, had just been theater. I was already part of his game. I'd been part of it all along. The work consumed me in ways I hadn't expected. Every night for a week, I arrived at the Mayfair townhouse at 10, was escorted to the third-floor workroom, and spent hours translating intercepted communications. Financial documents. Shipping manifests coded in euphemism. Conversations between men who thought their language kept them safe. It didn't. I made their secrets transparent. And I was good at it. Better than I'd been at the ministry, where bureaucratic translation had dulled my skills. This work was sharper, more urgent. Every word mattered. Every nuance could mean the difference between a successful deal and a failed one, between profit and loss, between safety and exposure. On the 8th night, Omer placed a new file on my desk, thicker than usual, marked with a red tab. Priority, he said, his voice neutral. I need this by morning. I opened it. Inside were documents about a proposed real estate transaction in Milan, a warehouse purchase that would allegedly be used for textile imports. But the language was wrong, the details too vague. And buried in the 3rd page was a reference to a company I recognized, Società Commerciale Adriatico. The same company that had been mentioned in the leaked documents that destroyed my life in Rome. My hands stilled on the paper. This was a test. I could feel Omer watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable. If I mentioned the connection, I'd reveal how much I remembered about the original scandal. If I leaked this information, contacted someone, anyone, he'd know I couldn't be trusted. I kept my face carefully blank and continued translating. The documents were fake. They had to be. The details were too convenient, the connection too obvious. He was testing whether I'd try to use his information against him, whether I'd reach out to Italian authorities or journalists, whether I still believed I could escape this. I worked through the night, translating every word with meticulous precision, noting the inconsistencies in a separate memo without commentary. By dawn, I'd completed the full translation and left it on his desk with a single sentence in Italian at the bottom. Asterisco, la trappola era ben costruita, ma troppo ovvia. Asterisk. The trap was well constructed, but too obvious. When I arrived the next evening, Omer was waiting in the workroom, the file open in front of him. He looked up as I entered, and something shifted in his expression, respect, maybe, or satisfaction. You passed, he said simply. Was there ever any doubt? Always. He closed the file. Trust is earned, Francesca, not given. Then we're even. I don't trust you either. His laugh was low, genuine. Good. You shouldn't. After that, something changed between us. The dynamic shifted from captor and captive to something more complex, more dangerous. Our exchanges became sharper, layered with subtext neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. He started staying later, working in the room while I translated. Sometimes he'd ask questions about specific phrases, testing my interpretations. Other times he simply sat in the leather chair by the window, reading his own files, his presence a constant weight in my peripheral vision. 2 weeks after the test, I was struggling with a particularly dense German contract when he appeared behind me, leaning over my shoulder to read the screen. What's the difficulty? His voice was close, too close. I could smell his cologne, that woody, expensive scent that made me think of dark forests and darker intentions. The terminology is maritime law, but the context is clearly pharmaceutical. Someone's mixing metaphors deliberately. I pointed to a clause. This could mean either shipping container or containment protocol, depending on interpretation. And which do you think it is? Both. That's the point. Plausible deniability built into the language itself. He was silent for a moment, and I could feel his breath against my hair. Then he straightened, moved back. You're wasted as just a translator, you know. You have an instinct for this. For what? Decoding criminal enterprises? For understanding how power actually works. How men like me operate in the spaces between legal and illegal. He returned to his chair. Most translators just convert words. You translate intent. I shouldn't have felt pleased by the compliment, but I did. Late one night, 3 weeks into my employment, I finished a translation and found him standing at the window, staring out at the rain-soaked streets of Mayfair. The room was dark except for the desk lamp and the amber glow from the streetlights below. Why do you do this? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't turn. Do what? All of it. The restaurants, the surveillance, the secrets. You obviously have money. You could do anything. So could you. Yet here you are. I'm here because you forced me. No. He turned now, his face half-shadowed. You're here because you needed purpose. The restaurant job kept you alive, but it didn't make you feel alive. This does. The accuracy of the observation stole my breath. He crossed the room slowly, and I should have stepped back, maintained distance. But I didn't. He stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head to meet his eyes. You hide behind professionalism the way I hide behind money, he said quietly. Both of us pretending to be something we're not. My pulse hammered in my throat. Then what are we really? Survivors. His voice dropped lower. People who learned to adapt. To become whoever we need to be. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? He tilted his head, studying my face. When you answer the phone in Italian, when you translate these documents, when you're sharp and quick and dangerous, that's the real you. Not Anne Francis, with her perfect posture and invisible smile.
Francesca.
The woman smart enough to disappear, but too principled to stay hidden. I didn't have a choice. You could have stayed hidden forever, Francesca. His hand lifted, almost touching my face, but not quite. You could have ignored your mother's call. Let it go to voicemail. Kept being Anne Francis until you believed it yourself. His fingers hovered near my cheek. But you answered. And that's when fate caught up to you. The phone call. That single moment when I'd forgotten to pretend, forgotten to hide. The moment everything unraveled. Or maybe the moment everything started to make sense. I regret it, I whispered. No, you don't. His hand dropped. You regret being caught. But not the choice itself. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire expression changed, the warmth evaporating, replaced by cold calculation. What is it? I asked. He read the message again, his jaw tightening. Then he looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Concern. The Italians know you're in London. The room tilted. What? Someone in Rome, someone connected to the ministry investigation. They've been looking for you. They know you're here. He pocketed the phone. It's too late to run now. What do you mean too late? I can. Run where, Francesca? His voice was hard now, urgent. They know about Anne Francis. They know about this address. They probably know you've been working for me. He moved to his desk, started pulling files. Running won't save you this time. It will only confirm their suspicions. What suspicions? He looked at me, and in that moment, I saw the truth he'd been hiding. That you've been selling Italian secrets to foreign interests. That you didn't just leak documents. You've been actively working against Italian intelligence. His expression was grim. They think you're a spy, Francesca. And they're coming to prove it. The call came at 2:47 a.m. I was deep in a translation. Russian this time. A shipping manifest that was clearly cocaine disguised as industrial equipment when Omer's phone rang. Not the casual buzz of a text, but the sharp, insistent ring of an emergency line. He answered in Italian.
Dimmi.
I kept my eyes on my screen, but every nerve in my body went on alert. His voice had gone cold, clipped. Whatever he was hearing, it wasn't good. Quando? A pause.
Quanto stanno offrendo?
Another pause, longer this time. Then, quietly, laced with something dangerous. Refuta. He ended the call and stood motionless for a moment, staring at his phone like it might explode. What's wrong? I asked. He looked up, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. We need to talk. Now. He led me down to the ground floor, to a room I'd never been in before, some kind of secure office with no windows and walls thick enough to muffle sound. He closed the door, locked it, then turned to face me. The Bellinis. His voice was tight with controlled fury. A Sicilian syndicate. They contacted my network an hour ago with an offer. Detailed information about your past, your real identity, evidence of the original document leak in Rome. All of it authenticated, verified, ready to hand over to Italian authorities. He paused. In exchange for you. My legs went weak. What? They want you, Francesca. Specifically you. They're willing to pay considerably for the privilege of delivering a wanted fugitive back to Italy. His eyes bore into mine. They know everything. When you fled Rome, who helped you get the forged documents, where you've been living? Everything. How is that possible? Because you should have told me everything. His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his control. You should have told me who was after you, what you were really running from, who might still be looking. But you didn't.
You kept secrets.
And now those secrets are being sold to the highest bidder. Anger flared in my chest, hot and defensive. You never asked. You blackmailed me, forced me to work for you, threatened to destroy my life, but you never once asked if there was anyone else hunting me. Because I assumed you were smart enough to volunteer that information. I assumed you were powerful enough to protect me. The words hung between us, raw and honest. We stared at each other across the small room, both breathing hard, the tension that had been building for weeks finally erupting. Why do they want you? He asked finally, his voice dropping. The Bellinis don't traffic in fugitives unless there's something more. What aren't you telling me? I closed my eyes. The documents I was accused of leaking, they weren't just trade agreements. They exposed connections between Italian politicians and Sicilian organized crime. Money laundering through legitimate businesses. The kind of information that could bring down families and careers, trigger arrests. I opened my eyes. The Bellinis were named in those documents. I translated them. Cristo. He ran a hand through his hair. So, they think you're the leak. I'm not. I never was. But it doesn't matter, does it? They believe I destroyed their operations. And now they want revenge. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Omer moved to his desk, pulled out his phone, made a call. He spoke in rapid Italian. Too fast for me to catch everything, but I heard enough. He was calling in favors, moving pieces on a chessboard I couldn't see. When he hung up, his expression was set like stone. You're sacked, he said quietly. The words didn't make sense at first.
What?
You're fired. Terminated. Effective immediately. He opened a drawer, pulled out a thick manila envelope. I'm letting you go, Francesca. You can't, after everything you just said. They're coming for you. He crossed the room, pressed the envelope into my hands. The Bellinis. Maybe Italian authorities. Maybe both. If you stay here, if you stay anywhere near me, you're dead. If you leave now, you live. I stared at the envelope, my mind reeling. I don't understand. Inside you'll find a new passport, Canadian this time, completely clean, impossible to trace.
Cash.
A plane ticket to Toronto via Rome with a 6-hour layover. And contacts in both cities who can help you disappear properly this time. His voice was businesslike, efficient, but something flickered in his eyes. My driver will take you to Heathrow. You leave in 3 hours.
Rome.
My voice cracked. You're sending me back to Rome? 6-hour layover. Long enough to see your mother, say goodbye. Then you continue to Toronto, and you never come back to Europe. He stepped back, creating distance. This is the only way you survive. Why? The question burst out of me. Why are you helping me? You blackmailed me, owned me, controlled every aspect of my life for weeks, and now you're just letting me go. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, quietly, because you remind me what it costs to lie for a living. The honesty in those words stripped away every defense I had left. I wasn't always this, he continued, gesturing around the room at the empire he'd built on secrets and manipulation. He stopped, searching for words. I was someone who believed in things, who thought the system worked, until the system failed me, and I learned to work around it instead. His eyes met mine. You still believe, Francesca. Somewhere under all the running and hiding and pretending, you still think truth matters. Justice matters. That's dangerous in my world. But it's also... He paused.
Rare.
Worth protecting. Tears burned behind my eyes. I can't just leave. I have nothing. I had nothing. No job, no friends, no life that wasn't built on lies. You have a chance, Omer said softly.
Take it.
Before it's too late. Heathrow Terminal 5 glowed with the harsh fluorescence of 5:30 a.m. Around me, early morning travelers moved through security with the glazed expressions of people who'd woken too early or never slept at all. I stood in the queue for international departures, my new Canadian passport, Sarah Mitchell clutched in hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The envelope Omer had given me contained everything he'd promised: cash, documents, contacts. And at the bottom, a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. Don't answer phones in Italian anymore. It's bad for your health. Oh, Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the surreal horror of the past month, I almost smiled. The flight to Rome would board in 40 minutes. 6 hours there to see Mama, to hold her hand one last time, to say the goodbye I should have said 2 years ago. Then Toronto. Then whatever came after. A life without Omer Cross's dark eyes watching me. Without the electric tension of our conversations. Without the terrible, intoxicating feeling of being seen completely, the good and the bad, Francesca, and whoever I was becoming. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, the same phone I'd used as Anne Francis, the one I should have destroyed weeks ago. Unknown number. A single message. Next time you answer in Italian, make sure it's to me. My heart stopped. I looked around the terminal, scanning faces, searching for him in the crowds. But of course he wasn't there. He was in Mayfair, or wherever men like him went when they weren't playing God with other people's lives. But he was watching. Somehow, always watching. I deleted the message, powered off the phone, and dropped it in the nearest trash bin. Sarah Mitchell didn't need it anymore. But as I walked toward my gate, as London disappeared behind me and Rome waited ahead, I wondered if I'd ever really escape him. Or if some part of me didn't want to. Flight BA 548 to Rome Fiumicino, now boarding at gate 27. I stood, picked up my bag, and walked toward whatever came next. Behind me, London held its secrets. Ahead, Rome held its judgments. And somewhere in the space between, in the 6-hour layover, in the liminal zone of airports and false names, I'd have to decide who I wanted to be when this was over. If it was ever really over. If men like Omer Cross ever truly let you go. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.